Okay, so what do I mean, guys, when I say your life is not just for you? It's really about how you can share your life with others and for others. All right, so let's talk about money for a second. Okay, so right now, money is tied to resources. Why? Because you need resources to build the world, the infrastructure, the civilization. Resources are based upon energy, all right? In our current system, energy is based upon oil. Now, whether or not there's other alternatives or viable other ways or access to energy, moving even into the etheric electromagnetic realms of energy, the ether, the Tesla coils, and levels of like free energy and potential, you know, kind of next level things that may or may not be already out there or being suppressed. All that aside, right? That's my point. Right now, what we deal with, where we are currently, dealing with oil, and the oil is tied directly to the dollar through the petrodollar system because oil basically replaced gold in many ways. We went off of the gold standard and we realized the thing that was going to be needed, the thing that was going to be in high demand and moving as a form of currency was oil in this time. Okay, so what we're understanding now is how money itself, the dollar itself, and that's the key of what I want to get to you guys today in this just short segment, is the dollar itself is a piece of paper, the fiat currency that you receive and deal with and trade with, right? It's a piece of paper. It's a highly specialized print to avoid counterfeiting. But the point I'm making is that essentially that's a piece of paper. A piece of paper in the modern day is not really backed by anything. In the original times, or up till very recently, this late 70s, and the gold standard of Nixon, I have to look at the exact date, but basically, just before I was pretty much born in 85. All right, so what we're going to look at, guys, is just how you can actually use that to your advantage by understanding this main thing. The dollar is a commodity. The piece of paper is being sold to you as a product. Why? Because just like any other product, its value, its relevance, its use case, its contribution, it all hinges upon whether or not people actually consider it as that, whether or not it can be tied to something that has true intrinsic value, something that actually is scarce, because a piece of paper can be printed, it can be destroyed. So it in and of itself, it holds that only small level of sort of innate value in the sense, for instance, you could create heat energy from a pile of paper, right? You could burn it. You could use it maybe in a few other ways, but the point I'm making is that's nothing compared to what $1 million would buy you. But when you think of the energy as that same substance in different forms, like water, connected to ice, connected to, its different states. The higher state is gas, more heated up, more action, right? Ice is frozen, water's in the middle. Okay, so what does this mean about money? Well, money has these different states as well. Like gold, it's this very physical asset, but it doesn't move very well. Money, we know it's just this very liquid thing. It doesn't really exist, and even most of the paper is just really a zero or a one when you come down to it, right? When it comes down to bits and computers. And so that's where the digital dollar, that's where the blockchain, all that stuff comes into play. And then you're going to have competing markets there. You're going to have markets that value, the ability to maintain those same freedoms we've had in terms of trade and in terms of commerce and, a sense of security, privacy. The trustless system makes it so that this system works. The other side of it is that it works so well, if they put their system and impose that upon everybody, well, then they have exactly, the perfect system to basically do whatever they want, because they now have the controls too. And while it is built to function extremely well in its perfection, we're still dealing with, okay, who's behind the scenes, who's pulling the strings. And that's where we're going to dial in for you. Like, how can you focus in your life on doing something where you see that money is what it is, and what's behind the money is what it is too. So in the modern day, money is becoming more and more tied to understanding, this balance in the world, that for one, if you just use money for something that's maybe not going to be the ultimate benefit of others in the long run, it's probably going to make you look bad, and you'll be looked at and remembered in such as that way. So many modern billionaires, it's tough to rationalize that, but at the same time, we know that even behind that layer, there's other levels of who's pulling the strings, right? So it's hard to ever say, oh, well, where is the fine line between capitalism and essentially socialism? But on some level, it's just between how a tribe would function versus how individuals function within a small group, because you're talking about things that started in base level numbers. Humanity started in base level numbers, and then now we're dealing with large scale numbers and large scale infrastructure, and that gets back to oil. And oil changed the world, because now oil was this new form of gold. And basically, obviously, if you need a way to trade oil and you become the currency in which the oil is traded, i.e. the US dollar, then the US dollar needs to be relevant. It needs to stick around. And it also becomes now, a power war where those who control the oil, they want to gain the leverage versus, those who are trying to basically profit off the system, right? The banks. And so because the petro is one side, petroleum, the dollar is the other side. And so that is what you're seeing. That's the East and the West. That's, the Middle East, the middle of the East, right? It's halfway between the East and the West. It's as the East began and as the West moved forward with this concept of banking and how to, transact in a way that is not just kind of the more traditional barter and trade, but the transaction now became its own product. And that's what I'm getting at today. So how do you just do that same thing for yourself and actually, not in like you're not the government, you're not these crazy sketchy giant banksters, But yes, so anyway, so you're not them, but you're trying to use the principle, the idea, to actually help others and help yourself. And the only way you do that is to actually see value within something that's not what we're taught, a piece of paper, but you actually see what's behind that. And you start to see the value in other things around you, other people, helping them, inspiring them. And before you know it, suddenly that money has less power, right? It's the same thing that is playing out on the world stage where, the world is shifting from the petrodollar to stabler, more controllable forms of digital assets, and that's a disruption. But in the process, the power shifting paradigm is like, who's going to come out and be able to affect the decisions into the next, primarily highly advanced technological age, because technology is moving at an exponential rate, right? So anyway, guys, we've covered a lot today. Please go down right now and hit that like, hit that subscribe if you're still here. Shoot me a comment. Let me know what you enjoyed, or if you have anything to share or to add. we are building here. And yeah, I want to share more with you guys as we grow. So today is a bit on the esoteric side, but the way you can apply it to your life is to remember, in a real legitimate way, understand the energy behind the exchange, understand the energy that goes back to that essence of trade in barter, and learn to leverage the value of your own resources, because that's how it works. Some people have kind of been given those tools or those resources. Some people have found out ways to sort of leverage what they can do for others with those. And then on each level or side, so to speak, or polarity, there's levels of corruption within that. But there's people who do those things well. There's people who are well, good at what they do, and they want to just fit into their role, so to speak. And then on the other side, people who are also necessary to facilitate the other aspect, which is, maybe the trade and the movement of the resources and the financial aspect of how markets actually flow and function. And so that's why there's so much, the terminology in markets is so tied to water. We'll go into some of that stuff for sure, like talking about the maritime law and stuff like that. But for now, yeah, just look at something simple like that, where you can understand the dollar. It's a commodity. It's being traded out there, and it's given value by these other things. Now, we as human beings, we hold our own innate value. I've talked about that. People make the parallel to the Matrix. Humans, in this essence, has batteries, and when you look at it from certain levels, it makes a lot of sense how the 9 to 5 will typically drain people, or just day-to-day life. We're not meant to feel this real deeper spiritual essence. We're meant to be more down in this heavy, physical, dense self and cut off from the infinite side of ourselves, which makes us feel disconnected. It makes us feel heavier, lower, and generally kind of in this place that is not really our natural state. So that's why what the whole concept of getting back to the higher self is just that infinite essence that God really can allow you to just feel, in a way, to reconnect to, because how else would you know unless you could feel it and say, okay, now it's like, you don't have to fight it or whatever. You can just say, okay. And then actually it's a liberating thing. So, and those of you who understand, you will understand me, right? And some might disagree. Some people might, look at it a different way or categorize things differently. But the point today, that we're getting to is this concept of how energy actually circulates, how markets actually work, and how you can just be a part of this next shift where energy is going to be about creativity, solving problems in a real unique way, because you think a lot of the basic needs kind of have been solved. Those structures will move into other places, and perhaps everywhere will have just 2 tiers: the lower third world kind of people who get sucked into the system completely everywhere, and then the infrastructure and the people above that kind of dig themselves out and make it up to be a part of, and hopefully we don't end up in that weird dystopian view. Hopefully we just have this harmonized level of what it's supposed to be, which is people who are good in these areas are good in these areas, and it actually all works together, more like nature. Even if there is a natural system or a flow of levels, right? The hierarchy really being consciousness, you could say. But anyway, the point I'm making is, if the flow is natural, everybody's just in the flow. Everybody's going to be like, okay, I'm happy to be doing this thing because it has some level of it's working, it's actually being respected, in the sense of okay, maybe some blue collar worker who lost their job, or somebody who's been working in a company for 10 years and now their skill sets are less relevant, and the system is built to just churn through parts, but humanity is built to reconnect in this like more perfect and infinite way and be a part of the natural ecosystem. And now we're some level between the greatest civilizations, you could say, and the highest levels of maybe the ancient future past, so to speak. If everything's a cycle and we're going back to that level of technology that maybe we once forgot. And then, the lowest kind of level of disconnection where somewhere in between we lost connection, right? And had to, but also the beauty of like really that point actually arising out of just sort of that forgetfulness and that return to nature, that return to the land, which also it's kind of like our most origin point, focal point of where we come from. But I think again that shift of that maybe it is a full cycle where there was high levels of technology and peace, and obviously there's lower levels or more ancient or more original or natural technologies that are peaceful. There's natural technology layers that are in times and moments that are definitely full of war. And then we started to get into the higher technology layers where we are now, or moments, timelines, so to speak, time periods. And right now we tend to have a lot of war. So maybe we will return to a high technology point, or at least an advanced technology. Because again, the highest technology is that peacefulness, that symbiosis, zero trash society, which the world once was zero trash. So that's all you need to know. All right, guys. And I'm not saying like, look, we've got it totally wrong. I'm not saying there's anything bad about technology on some level. And will technology invent its own and solve its own sustainability problem? Quite likely at some point. But in the meantime, how much water will AI use? How much water, how much minerals, how much does technology already use? And that's just on one layer. Okay, we can even go a layer further to when we talk about money again, but we're going to leave it at that today. We're going to come back around to the point, which was the money itself being this commodity. And so now you guys have a different framework to look at some of that stuff. Hit that like and subscribe again, and we'll see you guys soon. All right. Peace. Bless.